Vice Dean Aurora, distinguished panelists and guests, ladies and gentlemen, and good morning. On behalf of Asian Development Bank, it is my honor to welcome you also to this event. It's a great pleasure for me to join you at the Lee Kuan Yew School to launch ADB's new report, Asian Economic Integration Report 2015. We have a very distinguished panel with interesting insight. I very much look forward to hearing their insight in a few minutes. Before we start, let me give you some background about our report and the production process. Following the Asian financial crisis of the late 1990s, ADB was asked to use its expertise to help monitor the economic recovery, but also develop better understanding about causes and consequences of international capital flows and possibility of crisis. With the ASEAN +3 process starting, ADB started to produce reports monitoring economic integration and has created the Asian Recovery Information Center, the precursor to what is known today as Asian Regional Integration Center, a unit within the bank's Economic Research and Regional Cooperation Department. ADB has began to publish a series of reports monitoring the progress of economic integration and trying to study issues that are essential to our member countries. And today's report is a follow-up of that effort. Today's report, Asia Economic Integration Report, or AEIR, is now an annual report that combines all of those experience in monitoring, analyzing critical issues important for the region. And AEIR is a good complement to other ADB's major flagship publications. For example, we also have a semi-annual Asian Development Outlook, which tracks region's economic outlook and also looking to issues affecting countries' growth and development. I'm not going to preempt the content of this report. I'm going to leave it to my colleague, Dr. Jung-Woo Kang, to give you a summary of the report in a few minutes. But let me just note a few things. One is we all know that Asia is a very diverse region. We have very developed economies like Singapore, Japan. We have middle-income countries like China, Thailand, Malaysia. We have still relatively poor economies like Laos and so on. Some countries are very, very large. Some countries are relatively small. We have countries that are landlocked. We have countries that are sea-locked, a term I learned from my colleague at ADB. What binds all those countries together are economic integration through cross-border flows in goods, in capital, in people, in ideas. And that's the key reason why we are here today. Now, in spite of its diversity, the one thing that we see in common in Asia is relatively fast growth rates. Indeed, in spite of the fact that the world economy is facing very strong headwinds, Asia is also growing less fast than it used to be, but Asia remains to be the world's fastest growing region. ADB is forecasting a growth rate of 5.8% for developing Asia as a whole, and 6.0% for the region as a whole next year. 5.8 for this year, 6.0 for next year. So they will keep the region to be the fastest growing region in the world. If you look at single country contributions to global growth, the top two single country contributors, China and India respectively, are in Asia. Chinese contribution to global growth, about 34% of the total, is more than twice or three times that of the US, about 13% this year. Now, on the other hand, the region now is facing many challenges. Some of the challenges are new. First of all, we're seeing a reduction in GDP growth, partly driven by past success, but partly driven by demographic changes that makes it more challenging for regions to continue to maintain high growth. We're seeing lower global commodity prices, which are good news for countries that import commodities, but represent challenges to countries that are resource rich, and several countries in our region, certainly in Central and West Asia, but also in Southeast Asia, we have many resource-rich countries, and lower commodity prices represent a challenge. We also see the fact that the regions are relatively open to trade and investment also means that the weakness, relative weakness in advanced countries in US and Europe would have greater impact on our region than some other regions are somewhat less integrated. So these challenges underscore the need to closely monitor and analyze economic integration and to understand possible policy options. And that's, in effect, is the intent of this report, to monitor the progress, to understand the challenges, to understand the possible policy options. And these are also the objective of today's panel discussion. So I very much look forward to hearing this discussion after my colleague Dr. Kuan's presentation. This year's research report, in addition to monitoring progress on integration, we also picked a special topic that we think is important for our member countries. And the special topic we have chosen this time is on special economic zones. The number of special economic zones worldwide had increased from somewhere around 500 at the beginning of this century to close to 5,000 today. So someone must be in love with special economic zones, yet the performance record is very mixed. While you have successful examples like Shang-Jin Special Economic Zone of China, you also have many much less successful examples. That zones have been around, yet you do not see anything special coming out of those zones in terms of either export promotion or FDI promotion, because zones necessarily imply differences between firms operating in a zone and firms operating outside the zone. There are also distortions associated with zones. So therefore, the benefits really need to be so overwhelming to justify having those zones developed, and that's why. And yet, governments around the world, and certainly those in our region, continue to be interested in creating successful special economic zones. That's why we need to have a good study to understand factors behind success or failure of those zones. I hope you will find the morning's presentation and discussion informative. I certainly very much look forward to this discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Wei. I would now like to invite Prof. Eduardo, Vice Dean of Research and Associate Professor at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, for the welcome remarks. Prof. Eduardo, please.
Thank you. Director General Shang-Jin Wei, colleagues from ADB, ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome and good morning. In the tradition of our Dean, I would just like to make 3 short points in the 7 minutes that I have. The first one, of course, is to warmly welcome you all to the school and to thank the organizers for doing this. Every year, we have about 400 events in the school. I cannot think of other schools of public policy that we have events almost on a daily basis, sometimes twice a day. Yesterday, we had a big talk on future of U.S.-China relations. So we have become the go-to place when it comes to discussing a lot of issues that matters most to Asia. The second point I'd like to make is about our relationship with the Asian Development Bank. In a short period of time, the school has unconsciously become a magnet, the go-to place for all kinds of donors, big and small alike. So last month, or 2 months ago, the president of ADB was here. He was talking about financial integration at ADB, the role of ADB. 2 weeks ago, we signed an MOU with the World Bank. They're moving their infrastructure business to Singapore. 2 months ago, we hosted the president of the Korea International Cooperation Agency. They want to do more business with us. 5 months ago, the president of Rockefeller was here to launch her book, and so many other engagements. The president of the World Bank was here. The head of UNDP was here, and so on and so forth. So unconsciously, the school has become a magnet, a go-to place for donors. But among these donors, ADB holds a special place for us because our relationship with ADB goes back 15 years ago. And among these donors, we have the most extensive collaboration with ADB. From small things like internships to scholarships, to hosting these events, to sabbatical for ADB staff who come here, to our staff who go to Manila, to big research projects, to all kinds of partnerships. And we look forward to sustaining this kind of relationship with ADB. We are happy to know that ADB realizes that it has to move from being an infrastructure bank to also an infrastructure bank to a knowledge hub, right? So that it can compete with the World Bank and compete with the AEIR, which differentiates ADB from these two other agencies. The third and final point I'd like to make is that the role of a School of Public Policy in promoting Asian economic integration. Again, unconsciously, we've been, and not knowing about this, in fact, we have been doing a lot in terms of promoting economic integration in Asia. Just to cite a few examples. Last March, I was in Pyongyang for one week, and we were discussing special economic zones for North Korea. They're launching 26 special economic zones. They already have 5. And they have one actively engaged with South Korea. And they want to know how to run special economic zones. So I'm very glad that there's a professional report written on this. I can go back to Pyongyang next year, discuss this content of the report. So, which is good. The more they get integrated, the more they come. In fact, we have 2 North Korean students at the school, and they are specialists in special economic zones. So that is one. And we hope to get more managers from these North Korean special economic zones to come down here and learn about best practices in managing special economic zones. Last June, we were in Vladivostok. We were asked by the governor of Vladivostok, what can Vladivostok learn from special economic zones in Dubai, in Hong Kong, Shenzhen, in Singapore. And we spent 1 week there. Last December, we were in Dawei, in Myanmar. We discussed special economic zone. From 2009 to 2012, we spent 3 years running around Central Asia, promoting trade facilitation, customs integration, connectivity, public-private partnership, how different countries in Central Asia could cooperate with one another. From 2002 to 2011, we ran a program for the Mekong Leadership Program funded by ADB. Again, the theme is about economic integration in the Mekong region. All right. So unconsciously, the school has become a go-to place for educating, facilitating information, and exchanging ideas, and today launching reports for special economic zone. So with that, again, I would like to warmly welcome you to the school. I hope we can pick up new things here and move the needle forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So this morning, I'd like to present our annual report, which is called Asian Economic Integration Report for 2015. Let me just quickly move on to briefly talk about the outline of my presentation this morning. Our report consists of many two parts. First one is the regional cooperation integration. The other part is the special theme chapter, which changes every year. For this year, as was mentioned by Dr. Shang-Jin, we picked up the special economic zone as the theme of this year's special chapter. In the regional cooperation integration part, I will just talk about the growth spillover and the trade and investment integration, financial integration. Then I will talk about movement of people. And finally, I will just briefly touch upon the one salient policy initiative happening in the region, which is the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And moving on to the special theme chapter, I will talk about the definition and types of SEZs and evolution and why SEZs should be linked to the development strategy of the country and what could be the economic impact of SEZs and the success and failure factors behind and diverse performance of the SEZs in the region. And let me wrap up the presentation by talking about the future of zones. First, we wanted to check whether the regions, the economic growth is being more affected by the global factor or regional factor. So we ran the structural vector autoregression model, and the results of a variance decomposition indicates these two charts. Left chart is the global and the regional factors impact on the regional economic growth pre-global financial crisis, pre-GFC, and the right-hand side chart is about the post-GFC. As you can see from this chart, before, the pre-GFC, the global factor, which is represented by the US, the share represented by the green area of the chart was quite large, but the post-GFC, the portion has declined quite significantly. On the other hand, the both PRC factor, which is represented by the orangey color of the chart, and also the regional factor, local factor, has increased its influence on the regional economic growth. So this might indicate macro interdependence within the region has strength compared to its connectiveness with the global economy. So next slide is about Asia's overall trade growth. As you can see from the left-hand side chart, Asia trade growth fell below the GDP growth beginning in 2012. The same is true for the global trade and GDP growth, as you can see from the right-hand side chart. But the negative divergence between the trade growth and economic growth is more pronounced in Asia. We think there are several factors behind this phenomenon. In general, Asia's economies are rebalancing away from exports and investment toward consumption and services. Second, global and regional value chains appear to be maturing after decades of the rapid expansion. And in Asia, in fact, intermediate good trade, which accounts for almost 60% of inter-regional growth trade, declined and contracted 2.6% in 2014. And lastly, given the PRC's high weight into inter-regional trade, its growth moderation will reduce export growth across the region. Below in the table, we have also tried to test whether there has been any structural changes in the relationship between economic growth and trade growth. As you can see from the result of the vector error correction model regression, Asia's income elasticity of trade declined from 2.69 before the GFC to 1.30 afterwards. This means trade is growing less for the same 1% increase in the GDP than before. Now we have looked at how the region is performing in terms of trade integration and sub-regional trade integration. While Asia's global trade is slowing, its regional trade is actually quite strong. Actually, we have used the dynamic gravity model to estimate the regional trade bias using the distance between trading partners, colonial relationship, common language, and contiguity for the periods of 2010 to 2014 for the 173 countries, of which 43 were from Asia. As you can see from the regression result, which is represented in this table, after controlling for the size of trading partners and other distance and the other trade resistance factors, Central Asia, East Asia, and Southeast Asia are trading quite significantly higher within their subregion across all commodities. At the commodity level, intra-sub-regional trade bias is mainly driven by both intermediate goods and consumption good trade. If you have a look at the below part of the table, in terms of inter-sub-regional trade, I mean the trade across the sub-region, different sub-regions, while it is also significant, the degree is relatively lower than we can see from the inter-sub-regional trade bias in the above part of the table. And inter-sub-regional trade bias is mainly being driven by consumption goods instead of capital or the intermediate goods, as you can see from this table. And it is also worth noting that both South Asia and the Pacific and Oceania have significantly higher inter-sub-regional bias than sub-regional. This means these sub-regions are trading more outside of their sub-regions instead of within themselves. In fact, most of the South Asian countries are trading more with East Asia or Southeast Asian trading partners. Let me move on to the highlight the PRC's weight in intra-regional trade and what could be the impact of PRC's transformation. Actually, PRC is transforming toward more consumption and services-led growth. And this transformation presents both challenges and opportunities for the other economies in the region. Many economies in East Asia, Southeast Asia, and Oceania that supply raw materials and exporting parts and components to PRC could face growing challenges according to this transformation of the PRC. As you can see from the above chart in the left-hand side of the slide, PRC's total imports from Asia have stagnated since 2013. For the intermediate goods trade, imports from Asia, as you can see from the above part of the chart, share of import from East Asia has declined since 2012, putting PRC's East Asian trading partners such as Taipei, China, Korea, and Japan under growing strain. However, as you can see from the below chart of the slide, expanding consumption in PRC could expand market opportunities for consumption goods exports from the region. PRC's consumption goods imports from Asia are increasing, as you can see from the trend of the graph in the below part of the chart. In particular from Southeast Asia, which is represented by the orange part of the chart. Actually, Southeast Asia's portion for the PRC's import from Asia is the largest, even exceeding that from East Asia. As you can see from the right-hand side of the table at country level, many countries are exposed to the PRC-related adjustment challenges, including the Mongolia, Turkmenistan, Myanmar, and the Solomon Islands. As indicated by the red part of the bar, on the other hand, some economies in the region, such as the Myanmar, Hong Kong, China, and New Zealand, and Vietnam, are already exporting more consumption goods to PRC compared to others. Across the countries in the region, you might observe some potential opportunities for some regions, for others, more challenges ahead. In the meantime, PRC's expanding consumption will offer opportunities not only for the consumption goods exports, but also investment opportunities related to the industries inside the PRC. Many times, country-level gross exports data cannot accurately capture in which country actual value addition is generated. Sometimes the same value addition reflected into multiple countries' export data. So to address this issue, so-called the decomposition exercise of gross exports has been developed actually Dr. Shang-Jin and his two other colleagues are pioneers in this area. Using their methodology, we have tried to decompose inter-regional export data into 4 subcomponents, which were the domestic value-added, foreign value-added, return domestic value-added, and pure double counting. So we are presenting the composition results for the foreign value-added and the pure double counting only. In general, other components than the domestic value-added actually captures how much regional production network has deepened over time. And in terms of the growth rate of the inter-regional export, it was the 3.6 times from the year of 2000 to 2011. But on the other hand, the foreign value added increased by 3.9 times during the same period, while the pure double counting increased by 4.4 times. We think this is one indication of deepening regional value chain in the region. Among the countries, the regional value chain picture has also changed quite dramatically over time. As you can see from the left-hand side of the chart, back in 2000, which is represented by the blue bar, Malaysia accounted for the largest portion of the interregional foreign value-added portion, but by 2011, which is represented by the green bar, both PRC and Korea accounted for the largest portion of the interregional foreign value-added trade in the region. In terms of pure double counting, back in 2000, Taipei, China accounted for the largest portion, but by 2011, again, the PRC accounts for the largest portion. So over time, over the span of 1 decade, countries' position within the regional value chain has evolved quite dramatically. Let me move on to talk about a little bit about the foreign direct investment story in the region. Asia historically has been the net FDI recipient except for the 1984 to 1992. But in 2014, again, it has become net outward investor. This doesn't necessarily mean that the FDI inflows to the region has declined over time. Actually, inflows grew over time, 15% in 2013 and 26% in 2014 compared to 2010. But outward FDI investment grew much faster, 22% in 2013 and 45% in 2014. So this means the outward FDI is growing much faster than the FDI inflows into the region. Outflows from Asia were led by traditional investors such as Japan, Hong Kong, China, and Singapore, and also non-traditional emerging investors such as PRC, India, Malaysia, and Thailand. So emerging investors are increasing their investment in developed countries, including US and Euro, and also to the Latin America. So in terms of portfolio investment flows, for both the equity and the debt investment we mean the bond investment into the region, both inflows have declined over time, although we are not showing those trends using a chart here. We are showing the outward investment for the equity and debt. And as you can see from the chart, equity outflows increased. As you can see from the left-hand side chart of the slide, equity outflows increased 91.6%. And as you can see from the right-hand side, on the other hand, debt outflows fell by 178% from 2010 to 2014. So regional investors are expanding their equity investment much more than the debt investment. So main outward equity investment destinations are the rest of the world, except for the US and the Euro area, which is represented by the purple part of the bar, and the Euro area, the green part of the bar. And while equity investment to the US are stagnating, as you can see from the stagnating portion of the red part of the bar in the left-hand side chart. For the debt, main destinations are, again, the rest of the, for the debt, main destination in 2014 was the US, as you can see from the still small portion, but the negative portion of the equity outflows from the region for the US. We think the Asian investors are making bond investment more into US as a safer haven amidst the continuing uncertainty about the global monetary policy environment and also the euro debt crisis in the past couple of years. Interregional equity shares has declined while interregional debt shares have risen, but this does not necessarily mean that regional investors are making their investment into the region more compared to the equity investment. This reflects, we think, that regional investors are making much more investment outside the region compared to their investment inside the region. So let me move on to the volatility story of the capital inflows. Across capital inflows type, as you can see from the table, FDI shows the least volatility across the board, while the bank-related flows are the most volatile. Equity and debt inflows are in between. But if we look at the country-level volatility, the story becomes quite significantly different. In the case of PRC and Thailand, for example, their equity inflows is more volatile than the equity and the debt. So this is about the remittance inflows. Actually, Asia accounted for nearly 50% of the global remittances in 2014. In terms of the absolute amount of remittance inflows, India, PRC, and the Philippines received the most, accounting for the 61% of region's total. But as percentage of GDP, three countries of Tajikistan, Nepal, and Kyrgyz Republic were the largest recipient, having the more than 42%, 30%, and 29% out of their GDP, respectively. So in general, these economies rely heavily on the remittances for income, so they should continue to pursue industrialization and economic diversification to make their economies more resilient and provide more decent domestic job opportunities, we recommend. Our report also covered the migration and tourism receipt story, but let me skip this part, but perhaps you may wish to refer to our report about those stories. The TPP is the biggest trade deal in generation, covering 12 member countries representing 37% of the global GDP and 28% of the world trade. It is more comprehensive than other existing trade agreements or deals, covering intellectual property rights, labor and environmental standards, and the internet and the digital economy, participation of state-owned enterprise in international trade investment, and access for the small and medium-sized businesses. This also has a single rules of origin that applies to all members. In particular, the cumulative rules of origin, we think, could be quite powerful, and is expected to significantly influence global and the regional trade and the investment pattern, and also retains some potential trade diversion effect. Most trade members, as you can see from this table, will gain benefits. Australia, Canada, and New Zealand on increase in the agriculture and dairy products exports, and in the case of US, from access to the service markets in the member countries, and the Japan from increased exports of manufacturing goods such as automobiles and the machineries. In fact, the largest beneficiaries will be the Vietnam. Around the 10.5% income gains is expected for Vietnam, mainly due to their expanding export market of labor-intensive goods with lower tariff and non-tariff barriers, in particular from the US. We view that if TPP maintains open and flexible accession to new members, it could facilitate further freer trade globally and regionally. Let me quickly move on to the theme chapter, which is on the special economic zone. First definition. There are various types of zones in the region and worldwide. It could be called free zones, free trade zones, free industrial zones, commercial zones, and free port, or single factory zones, or free ports. In our research, our definition of the SEZs consists of three components. First, it should be geographically clearly defined area. This is why it is called zone. Second component is the governance aspect. There should be a single management or administration for the SEZs. Thirdly, it usually has more liberal and streamlined business procedures compared to those in the rest part of the country, such as preferential tax treatment and one-stop shop services. This is why it is called special. Okay, types of SEZs by modality, by ownership modality, in the region, both privately developed and operated zones and public zones coexist in the region, and the total number of zones exploded over time, as mentioned by the Dr. Shang-Jin during his opening remarks. We don't see general particular pattern in terms of the ratio between public and private zones in the region. It varies across countries. And also, as indicated by the asterisk, many Asian countries have PPP modality for the zones. So we have come up with some conceptual framework in viewing the evolution of SEZs in the region. The first stage zones mainly focus on traditional objectives such as import substitution, job creation, foreign exchange earnings. For example, SEZs in Cambodia are of the traditional export processing zone type, employing low-skilled workers to produce the goods such as the garments, electronics, electrical products, and household furnishings. Moving on to the second stage zones, now SEZs focus on export competitiveness and product diversification through both backward and forward linkages with the domestic economy. At this stage, the role of the FDI becomes very much important to ensure technological spillover and demonstration effect, and to promote domestic industrial development in the country. Further, at the third stage, SEZs now can be used for the test beds for the incentive policies as well as structural reforms for the economy, as we have seen from the cases of PRC, Shang-Jin, and other SEZs which have been used for the structural reform test bed for the PRC. And also at this stage, SEZs can promote agglomeration economies through strategic partnership and alliances between firms inside and outside the zones, and also promote formation of the industrial clusters, which can cover the various segments of the horizontal production stage, which includes R&D design and sourcing, manufacturing, sales and marketing and distribution. So at this stage, the SEZ can really become the pole for the economic development and growth. Okay, so let me try to briefly highlight the linkage between the SEZ and the development strategy of the country to ensure and enhance the nationwide broader impact of SEZs. SEZs should be linked to the country development strategy. Then SEZs can become a major engine for national development through backward and forward linkages, providing significant opportunities for the domestic participation, knowledge sharing, innovation, and the skills development. In fact, as you can see from the first row of the table, the Bangladesh has incorporated SEZ concept into their 5-year development plan and also into their medium-term expenditure framework. PRC, as we all know, they have used SEZ modality in promoting and pursuing the reform and opening policy, industrialization policy, coastal area development policy, and the Western development policy across the all board. Korea has also used SEZ in the context of their 5-year development plan, and the Philippines PEZA Act, the Philippine Export Processing Zone Act, specifies a development strategy of SEZs should be consistent with the priorities of the national development as outlined in the medium-term development plan. But other countries such as Cambodia, Kazakhstan, Sri Lanka, Thailand have used SEZ mainly to promote some industrial development for specific sector. In the case of Cambodia on garments, and the Kazakhstan for the petrochemicals, Sri Lanka on garments, textiles, and Thailand on the automobile parts and the petrochemicals. So also enabling legal framework is a prerequisite for the establishing transparent quality institutions for SEZs. And the third component is the dedicated governing authority. We think this is a representation of the good governance structure of SEZs. We have tried to test whether in the region SEZs have any positive and significant impact on the economic performance of the region, on export, FDI, and the firm level performance. First, we used the gravity model to examine if SEZs have any significant impact on the bilateral exports after controlling for other geographic and historical and trade-resistant factors. We have covered 169 countries for the period of 1990 to 2014. And as you can see from the first part, the first above table, worldwide SE's impact on export is slightly negative, which is being pulled by both regions of Africa and Latin America. For Asia, SE's impact is a positive, 0.03, but it's not significant. We also tested whether the number of SEZs have any positive impact on the export performance for the countries, covering based on the 7-country data, Bangladesh, Cambodia, PRC, India, Kazakhstan, Philippines, and Sri Lanka for the period of, again, 1990-2014. As you can see from the second column of the export table, it actually has a positive impact. When the number of SEZs increases by 10%, export increases by 1.1% for the Asian countries. Further, we have tested whether SEZ law and the SEZ authority have any positive impact on export performance in the region, as I have highlighted the importance of these two factors in promoting nationwide broader economic impact of the SEZs. As you can see from the third column of the export table, among the countries with the SEZs in Asia, those with SEZ laws export around, on average, 40% more than those without. And as you can see from the fourth column, those with SEZ authority export by 27% on average more than those without. Next, we have tested whether SEZ have a positive impact on FDI. The left-hand side column shows that positive and significant impact across the regions when we tested without time dummy. The right column result shows that the model result when we included time dummy. When we include time dummy, still most of the regions, SEZ impact on FDI is still positive, but the significance disappears. But for Asia, still significance is retained. On average, countries with SEZs can expect 82% higher FDI compared to those without. Lastly, we have tested firm level performance because the overall in the region, export and FDI can benefit from existence and number of SEZs in the region, but we view that performance varies across countries in the region. So we have tested firm level performance using World Bank Enterprise Survey data. As you can see from the lowest part of the table, when we tested firm level performance for Bangladesh, there was no significant difference between those inside and outside SEZs. But in the case of India, ironically, those inside SEZs are performing more poorly than those outside SEZs, as indicated by the negative and significant coefficient of this SEZ variable. For Malaysia, those inside SEZs, firms inside SEZs are performing much better than outside SEZs. So although overall, all in all, the region can expect positive impact of export and FDI, but the country performance varies quite widely in the region. Success and failure factors. The fiscal incentives are quite important for insured firm investments, but we think institutional factors such as the independent SEZ governing authority and enabling legal framework, as we have shown before, turn to be a much greater draw over time. Factor costs such as cheap factory size, abundant labor, supply, and subsidized utility charges are basic prerequisites, as we all know. Strategic location, multimodal connectivity with resource and trading partners, and also access to infrastructure are also very much important. Institutional capacity, including institutional efficiency, dependable judicial systems, adequate security and transparency standards are crucial to provide a transparent and stable business environment. And lastly, I would like to highlight that the strong state and local government commitment is very crucial to ensure the success of SEZs. Failure factors are actually flip side of success factors, so let me skip this one, but let me just highlight a few points here. The ambitious goals relative to the country's competitive advantage. For example, in some Central Asian countries, they wanted to establish high-tech industry SEZs, but because of the lack of the skilled labor, they had to import all the high-quality engineers from abroad. But when they left the country, the SEZs were closed. So this is over ambition compared to the country's competitive advantage, without considering the country's competitive advantage aspect. And the poor governance and the lack of oversight usually leads to rent-seeking and corruption, as we have observed in some failure cases, again in Central Asia, some money laundering and bribing behaviors related to the SEZ establishment and development and operations. So we have seen such failed examples quite often. Looking ahead, we think that the popularity of SEZ still remains quite strong under still changing business and economic environment. As weight of service increase over time, more and more SEZs are increasingly covering services such as IT services in India, finance in Shanghai, and the largest and business services in Korea's free economic zones. Urban development smart cities, we think, will increasingly become integral part of the SEZ concept in the future. And the country can adopt a different approach tailored to their unique economic, cultural, and development context. The success stories of PRC and Shang-Jin may not be applicable to other countries in an exact same way. There should be some country-tailored development strategy aspect and in the context of economic and development strategy. So let me wrap up my presentation by just recapping some key messages from our report of this year. Although Asia's global trade is slowing down, regional trade bias is quite significant. On FDI, Asia's both global and regional investments are expanding. Asia is getting more globally connected than regionally on finance. In particular, many Asian investors are expanding their equity investment outside of the region, and they are pursuing investment diversification. Remittance and tourism receipts are an important source of the national income for some of the countries in the region, but high volatility could pose some challenges to these countries. SEZ's linkage to country development strategy is key to ensure broad and the nationwide impact of SEZs, and also it needs to be linked to domestic economy through backward and forward linkages. SEZ in general can help expand export and investment, in particular in Asia, but as I have highlighted a couple of times, performance varies quite widely across countries. In the future, SEZ will become increasingly integral part of the urban development, industrial cluster development, and economic corridor development we foresee, and also it can promote further regional cooperation integration across the borders, as we can see from some nascent stage of the development of the cross-border economic zones across countries. Let me stop here. Thank you very much for your attention.